Welcome back to WD.
FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. We're your hosts, Bri Bertolacini, Content and Research Manager.
And Chris Mullen, Marketing and Editorial Specialist at the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Welcome to our mini Musings episode. Now, this is a new format we created to be able to bring different topics related to Walt's life that we just don't get a chance to discuss in our collections clash.
Yeah, there are just so many themes, stories, and people represented in the Walt Disney Family Museum that we feel need to be highlighted in more ways than one. Today, we're going to be discussing Walt's reception around the world, and much like how we do our collections clash, we'll see how we both interpret the topic.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this particular topic because, especially in our awards lobby, you can see kind of the physical representation of how so many countries around the world celebrated Walt in some way. So, Chris, do you have maybe a favorite award from a different country or one that really stands out?
I'm not sure if I have a singular favorite international award exactly. There are just so many unique awards that are fun to point out. First, that kind of comes to mind, with Oscar season in full swing, I'm a big movie buff, not just of the Disney variety, and I love watching the major award shows every year to see what the consensus is of that year's best films. And one important tradition in the film industry is debuting films at international film festivals. The Cannes Film Festival, which takes place in Cannes, France, is one of the big three major European film festivals alongside Venice and Berlin, as well as one of the big five major international film festivals alongside Venice, Berlin, Toronto, and Sundance. In 1947, Walt won the Cannes Film Festival Grand Prize for Dumbo, signified by a certificate with beautiful calligraphy, which can be seen in one of the first cases guests walk by in our awards lobby. Dumbo had its general release in 1941, but due to the effects of World War II, did not have its French release until 1947 at the festival. Another very cool award that we have on display is for an outstanding contribution to American-Swiss amity, given in 1960 by the American Society for Friendship with Switzerland. It features a quartz rock crystal on top of a wood block base that is painted black and angled in front. 4 gold stars can be found on each corner on top of the base with an inscribed metal plate in the front. Now, no surprise, 1960, this award was given the year after the film Third Man on the Mountain and the Disneyland attraction Matterhorn bobsleds opened. As a big fan of both, I can absolutely appreciate the recognition.
Such a great pick. And, it's so hard to just kind of pick one award that best represents Walt's recognition around the world. I really like the Cannes Film Festival one. That's super interesting about the Dumbo release. I don't think I ever really thought about that and kind of its release overseas. But for me, I think one that I always like to point out is the Order of the Aztec Eagle. It's the highest order a non-citizen can receive from the Mexican government. Now, this is more of a personal connection for picking this one because my family is from Mexico, but I also picked it because this award inspired a drink you can order if you are traveling around the world showcase at Epcot. So currently the Aztec Eagle tribute cocktail is a D23 member exclusive that can be ordered in the Mexico Pavilion and the La Cava del Tequila. I don't speak Spanish, so my accents are horrible, but this is just a fun way to pay homage to a significant connection between Walt and the country of Mexico. That's just fun to be able to see in the park. So you can see the actual award and, order the drink at Epcot. But because I highlighted the Order of the Aztec Eagle, I'll also highlight another country that's personal to me. As my last name, Bertolacini, suggests, part of my family is from Italy. And it's actually super fun to walk through the awards lobby and find all the awards that came from Italy because there are a lot, 18 to be exact. Italy loved Walt Disney. One award that stands out from the rest is the Trofeo d'Arte della Biennale. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but we're going with it.
You hit all the vowels and the consonants, so just keep rolling with it.
I tried. Well, this award was designed to honor Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1938 at the Venice Film Festival. So kind of fun talking about different festivals here. Now, to describe this award, it has almost like a tree-like quality made of bronze. So there's 2 deer and a tortoise sitting at the base underneath the figure of Snow White. The 7 dwarves are marching below her, and the branches that split off next to Snow with birds kind of perched on the limbs. So this elaborate award was given a prominent place in Walt's office.
If I had a nickel for every time that an award in the awards lobby had a tortoise with a prominent Disney character on top, I'd have two nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's kind of weird that it happened twice. There's also the Comandango Mickey that has Mickey on it on top of a tortoise. So if you're looking through the awards lobby, there are two tortoises involved. Now, these that we've brought up are great highlighted awards. But, going through the galleries, when I think of Walt's international recognition, I think of dignitaries from around the world visiting Disneyland. From the Bob Thomas biography of Walt Disney, an American Original, quote, "The first foreign personage to visit Disneyland was President Sukarno of Indonesia. He was dazzled by the place, and as he and Walt stood on the prow of the Mark Twain, he remarked, quote, 'Mr. Disney, you must be a very wealthy man.' And Walt smiled and replied, 'Yes, I guess I am. They tell me I owe about $10 million.'" But the best story from a history perspective, in my opinion, about foreign leaders visiting, or famously not visiting, rather, is the tale of Premier Nikita Khrushchev of the Soviet Union and his September 1959 tour of America. Here's an excerpt from Neil Gabler's Walt Disney, The Triumph of the American Imagination. Quote, "Khrushchev's wife, Nina, had seen a Disney film in 1942, found herself entranced, and requested that during the visit she and her family be allowed to see Disneyland. Walt and Lillian planned to welcome the party and escort them around the park. But when Khrushchev arrived in Los Angeles from New York, he was told that his security could not be assured and that the trip to Disneyland would have to be canceled. Khrushchev, quote, exploded, as the New York Times described it. Quote, 'I would very much like to go see Disneyland,' he shouted. 'But then we cannot guarantee your security,' they say. 'Then what must I do? Commit suicide?' Continuing to boil, Khrushchev asked the gathered journalists, quote, 'What is it? Is there an epidemic of cholera or something? Or have gangsters taken hold of the place that can destroy me?' End quote. He was still fuming at a star-studded luncheon in his honor at the 20th Century Fox studio, Los Angeles Police Chief William Parker said, because Mrs. Khrushchev passed her husband a note while he spoke, reminding him of the insult. Quote, 'We have come to this town where lives the cream of American art,' he began as his voice shook with indignation. 'And just imagine, I, a premier, a Soviet representative, when I came here to this city, I was given a plan, a program of what I was to be shown and whom I was to meet. But just now I was told that I could not go to Disneyland.' He closed, 'I cannot find words to explain this to my people.' And honestly, I understand."
This man really wanted to take his wife to Disneyland. Oh my gosh. That I don't know that I've fully read through that story before. That was so funny. I hope
It
he
was
eventually got
wild.
to go to Disneyland.
I don't know. I wouldn't put money on that.
I think that story, Chris, really kind of shows and exemplifies just how much of a global impact Disneyland had made, that, all the way in Soviet Russia, it was so well known that this was the go-to place to go to in America, and so well sought after to attend because it was just so one of a kind. So it's just really interesting.
Yeah, Disneyland really signified such a cultural institution that if you really wanted to understand how Americans consume their media, that Disneyland is really the perfect place to visit, to get a hold of that. So yeah, I agree. It really kind of works on multiple levels.
Yeah, and so when I was thinking about Walt's global success and kind of how the world recognized him, an instance that really stands out of kind of early success and early recognition came with Walt's 1935 European vacation that he took with his wife Lillian, brother Roy, and his wife Edna. Walt had been tirelessly working on their first ever animated full-length feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, for more than 2 years at this point. And his brother Roy sensed that Walt needed a much-needed break from the stress, and they embarked on a 2-month European trip. Talk about a vacation. Now, we have a panel in our Snow White gallery that really highlights this trip, but it can kind of get lost in that gallery because there's just so much you want to read about Snow White and so much amazing art. But the group traveled to the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy. And everywhere they went, Walt was met with fanfare. They met with dignitaries, artists, and authors like H.G. Wells, author of War of the Worlds. According to a Norwegian newspaper that wrote about Walt's arrival to London, they noted that a crowd met them at the train station, and Walt and his group needed police protection. Children were apparently singing Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf and performing the, quote, Dance of the Pigs. Not quite sure what exactly that entails, but now, in the September 1935 issue of the Mickey Mouse magazine, that is, quote, written by Mickey Mouse, Mickey reported that Walt, quote, hopped into a taxi to go to our hotel, and when we glanced back, we saw hundreds of boys on bicycles following us. They wanted Uncle Walt's autograph. One boy who could ride faster than the rest caught up with us and tossed his autograph album into the window of the cab, end quote. So that's interesting. And also, as a really little side note, this was the first time the earliest I've ever seen Walt being referred to as Uncle Walt. And I know that really became a prominent thing in the 1950s and 60s when he was on the television show. That's kind of where I feel like most people pull that particular title from. But yeah, it's just interesting, I think, from Mickey's perspective of that Walt's not his father, but Uncle Walt maybe was more of an easier phrase, a way to describe Walt.
And I would follow that too, that this is an early instance of Walt recognizing Mickey as not just a character that is drawn on a screen, but really treating him with the respect of being, a full person, a full character in his own right. We would see later on and during World War II when the topic would come up of government contracts and using Disney characters that, Walt would insist that using a Mickey Mouse or a Donald Duck was like using Gable, or like one of these big stars from a Hollywood studio. It's just because they're drawn characters doesn't mean that they're not big stars and that they shouldn't be treated as such. Yeah, it's a really interesting part of the example that you brought up, that Mickey himself is writing this account, kind of showing that he is his own person.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that I guess Mickey Mouse was also in attendance on this trip. I love how, a little trip report there. Now, in this particular trip, it was, while it was peppered with relaxation and sightseeing, it was also a great time to meet with press from all over Europe. And at every stop, Walt made time for interviews with the press and made appearances at local events to promote his Mickey Mouse and Silly Symphony cartoons. Now, what's interesting is that on this trip, Edna Disney actually wrote in her journal all of the different events and everything that they did. And a lot of her journal is published in Disney's Grand Tour, Walt and Roy's European Vacation, Summer 1935 by Didier Guez. So highly recommend that book. And that was used as a reference for this section here. So according to Edna Disney's journal from this trip, quote, Walt and Lily had several pictures taken. Walt talked for a couple of hours to reporters. Then we all went to Paris by car. At 5:30 p.m., Walt gave a press reception to 50 or more newspaper men and women, end quote. While in Paris, Walt was presented with the League of Nations medal in a large theater with 4,000 schoolchildren present. Diane Disney Miller shared, quote, everywhere they went, Dad was greeted with excitement and enthusiasm by the press. I think they were a bit surprised by the extent of it. The trip was a success in many ways. Dad was convinced that there was an audience for his cartoon feature and was refreshed and stimulated to continue work on the film, end quote. So it's just interesting to kind of see the kind of celebrity that Walt had become at this point in his career. And he's still in a very early part of his career. Snow White still hadn't come out. And the recognition that he would receive from around the world would only grow exponentially from here. And so much so that when Walt passed in 1966, there was just an enormous global reaction. We have in our collection sympathy telegrams that were sent to the Disney family from so many countries around the world.
Yeah, there are so many ways that Walt was influenced by the world around him, and people from all over the world showing their appreciation and response. This feels like a good way to wrap up this episode by mentioning the attraction that I think best ties this topic together, the attraction It's a Small World.
Now, this is one of my favorite fun facts about this attraction, and I think it's this story that makes it one of my favorite attractions at Disneyland. When It's a Small World opened at Disneyland, people from all around the world joined the ceremony, and water from all over the world was shipped to Disneyland so children representing those countries could actually pour it into the moat. And I just love the combining water from all over the world into one body of water and kind of like the symbolic coming together. This is such a symbolic way to represent the core theme of this attraction, that we can all come together. And, over 50 representatives from all over the world joined the ceremony.
Then in his dedication speech, Walt said, quote, "I'd like to welcome all of you to the dedication of It's a Small World, and I'd like to thank all of these wonderful children who have performed here to make this dedication such a success. Thank you, children. Beautiful children. When we completed It's a Small World presentation at the New York World's Fair, we felt that we had accomplished what we had set out to do. We wanted to foster a better understanding among nations of the world by showing the dress, the customs, the language, the music, and a little of the culture of our neighbors around the world, and we wanted to show it to be a very happy one. I think it's safe to say that having fun has universal appeal." End quote.
I love that. Now, Richard Sherman, one part of the Sherman Brothers who wrote the It's a Small World song, wrote a new verse a year before his passing that was recently released to honor his memory. And I think it's a kind of a great way to wrap us up today. So it goes, "Mother Earth unites us in heart and mind, and the love we give makes us humankind. Through our vast, wondrous land, when we stand hand in hand, it's a small world after all."
Preach. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks for tuning in to WDFM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all social channels at WDF Museum for all the latest updates.
For your safety, please remain seated throughout your voyage, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the boat. And please watch your children. Keep moving forward.
Bye.
Bye.